Hey, this is Steve, host of the show. We're going to do things a little bit different today. I will be playing you an episode from another podcast called AOL Underground, which I also host. I think you'll really like it. Check it out.
Welcome to AOL. Welcome to AOL Underground.
Please state your handle of the years you were active on AOL.
Yeah, my handles when I was active were Surf Kahuna and then Mac Diablo. And years active, gosh, I'm going to say 94, 95 to 97, maybe 98. I think 98 might be pushing it.
What's a kahuna?
A kahuna is a Hawaiian term essentially for the chief. The term was actually given to me by my mother. I was in fifth grade. I was actually going into fifth grade when I decided to sign up for AOL. So, 11 years old at the time. And I wanted my mommy's help. I was like, what's a cool name? And she's like, oh, it's Surf Kahuna, like the kahuna of surfing, the big chief awesome guy of the village and surfing. But it's not surfing the waves, it's surfing the information superhighway. And I was like, that's cool. And we came up with Surf Kahuna together. But of course, no one got it. Everyone just thought that I actually surfed.
Yeah, actually, that's what I would have assumed too. But your mom's really good at coming up with handles. That's amazing.
Yeah, she was a kindergarten teacher for many, many years. And part of that is having to be creative. So
that's cool. Okay, so when did you first use a computer?
First time using a computer is going to be, I'm going to say second or third grade. And there's a bit of a sad undertone here. So pardon that. But my father wasn't around a whole lot. And when he did show up, there were certain things that he would kind of want to expose me to. And whatever those things were, I would run with them for the rest of my life. And one of those was computers. He went to an adult night class, to learn how to do computering, as he used to call it. And I was sitting there learning more than the adults there and loving it. And when I would go over to his place, he would have these buddies who would give him games on floppy disks. And he'd be like, here, do something with this. I'd be like, all right, cool. And so computers just became a big thing. And for many years, I had access, for maybe a year or two, I only had access at his house. But then, at school, we started doing keyboard typing lessons and stuff like that. I got up to like 50 words a minute in fourth grade. Like I was obsessed, just absolutely obsessed from that point forward.
Cool. Would you be able to talk a little bit about some of the cool stuff you did on the school computers?
Yeah. So school computers, it was really in fifth grade where I started I don't know if the term blossoming really fits here, but what I loved to do was use ResEdit. And that's because most of the computers I was on at the time, I was a Mac user. So I'm sure a number of your listeners right now are like, oh, dude, what? Like a Mac guy.
Well, for those of us that did not use Mac, what is ResEdit?
Yeah, so the Macintosh operating system, the hierarchical file system, HFS, differed completely from FAT32 or the eventual NTFS back in the day. And the files on your system, especially executables, if you will, and the classic Mac OS system, we're talking Mac OS 6.x and 7.x, well, up through 8 and 9 also, they used two different forks in the data stream. Basically, one of them was the actual data stream itself, the code stream, and then one of them was what's known as the resource fork. The resource fork is where literally you would have all of the damn like graphics and sounds and even like the menu, the pull down menus, everything you could think of that would be more of like a visual element, right, to the program, tool, utility, whatever it was, would actually be stored on disk in the resource fork. So in that fork, what we ended up with the ability to do is modify all of that with a tool called ResEdit. And I learned about ResEdit from a buddy of mine and who I met in San Jose in the Silicon Valley. We'll get to that, I'm sure, coming up here. And he showed me like, hey, look at these cool things you could do. So I took that probably the wrong, a little too far. So at school, it would be things like, say you launch a tool or an application or a game. We had this game called Number Munchers. Any Mac user from my generation should recognize that name right away. Number munchers. Oh, you learn math by playing a game with these little guys who munch numbers as you move around the screen. And in number munchers, I basically, the first thing I did was modify the file menu. So literally when you execute the application, right, instead of saying file at the top of the screen, it would say, fuck you. And so I did that on my school computer, and it probably was not the best idea because it was obvious who done did it.
Why was it obvious?
Oh, because I was the computer guy already at that time, in 5th grade. I was already, whenever the teacher had issues, she would ask me, like, how do we fix this? And I was always on the computers no matter what. I'd stay in from, recess and just be on the computers and be a computer nerd the whole time. And so,
So they just assumed it was you, and you were just like, yeah, it was me.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, I always denied it. No, I was young and dumb-minded. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about.
Nice, perfect.
But I would modify things like, the resource fork on the old Mac applications. You would have literally sound files, and they would be SND space was the OS type identifier for the resource fork. So for anyone listening, you can go look up, like literally just Google resource fork.
Is that like an alternate data stream in Windows land?
Yes, ADS was actually developed as a carryover to offer backwards compatibility with resource forks. That's why they were built in the first place.
Cool.
So if you Google resource fork and just go right to the Wikipedia article, then you'll see a designation under resource identifiers. And you'll see that there are 4-letter identifiers like dialog boxes and a program were stored in a resource fork type of DITL. So if you open ResEdit, and you opened up a Macintosh application and you double clicked on DITL, any dialog boxes that were in that program and that tool, you would see them. You'd be able to modify them, right? The window, what it looked like, the size of the window, the buttons, the name of the buttons, and for that matter, if you knew what you were doing, what code was actually executed when you clicked the buttons.
So this is like a hexadecic GUI on steroids or something, right?
Yeah. I got befuddled by my own words. I've never, ever seen any type of tool that provided that ability to modify something in a standard operating system environment, right? It's literally a what you see is what you get. It's a WYSIWYG editor for like all the damn things, Windows tools and programs and games and malware for that matter. They have resources. You can have resources, as they call them, embedded, but it's nothing like it was back then. So I would take the images or graphics and I'd modify them. I had an old QuickCam. If anyone remembers the Connectix QuickCam, and it was a grayscale, horrible webcam, like the first one that we had in the Mac world, at least. And I would take pictures like around the class, and I would then like splice them into like some of our our programs and tools. So you randomly just see a classmate when it's supposed to be like some learning program or something. And it was just really fun. It felt like I was a hacker, right? Now you look back at it now and you're like, were you a hacker? Well, by the definition of the term, yes, absolutely. You felt like you had this God level access to modify what you wanted. In reality, it was just this really easy and readily available method to, kind of screw around with things. And so I ran with that. I loved it. And that learning how that worked and functioned. And then over the years, starting to identify how that's not really the way the world works with most binary executions in most environments, but also learning how you can manipulate things today, right? And how the cracking scene has evolved over the years. That's been a big part of what's motivated me. And that initially learning about ResEdit and tinkering with it in the classroom is something that I loved it.
That's really cool. And then you said there was a scripting element. Not to get too deep into this, but I think I kind of want to. What is the scripting component of it?
So ResEdit itself wasn't really scripted.
You said you could invoke scripts or something at some point.
Oh, so there was the OS type of code, which was the actual functions themselves that made up the program. You could simply manipulate the other resources to point to different bits of code. So if I had a dialog box that would pop up, and if I clicked one of 3 buttons, it would do something, you could alternate those or change those to some other function or bit of code. So essentially, let's say that you had a box that popped up, and this is one of the things I did in my classrooms. If you had a box that popped up and you clicked the button that said, there's one button, right? And that button, when you clicked it, would, quit the program or let you get to the next screen or whatever, right? you would just basically make that button launch the same window that was just opened. So in other words, there's no damn way to close that window, right? So I do stupid things like that, and just have fun with things. If there were buttons on a window, or if there was a link, or not a link, wasn't like they weren't really called links back then, but something you clicked on, right? And a tool that would progress, I guess, or exit or whatever, I would sometimes just remove that functionality so that if you click the button, it wouldn't do anything, People would just be stuck like, I don't get it, what's going on? So just stupid little things that were fun and gave me this feeling of like, I can control this environment, and I was enamored with it.
So that's really cool. You got to manipulate a GUI application, I think they call them FAT applications today, but like a desktop application, right? And then you found AOL and you started manipulating that. How did you find AOL? Because it seems like then you made programs once you got to AOL too, right? Or so you started manipulating the GUI, as it were, right?
I lived in a little kind of farming community, really, when I was younger, and it was an hour south of San Jose, California, in the United States. So the Silicon Valley, Saratoga, Cupertino, Sunnyvale. These are all names that folks who have lived there be like, oh yeah, that's right in the heart, of Silicon Valley. Like Apple's based in Cupertino, And I lived in this little kind of podunk town, and then all of a sudden we moved up to San Jose for 5th grade. And when I moved there, I met this guy. We were playing roller hockey one day, and his name was Gary. He was much older than me. I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years older than me, right? I'm 11, so he's like maybe already in high school or at least junior high. And he at some point he mentioned, "Oh, I do a lot of computer stuff," And I was like, "Oh, really? I love computers." And it kind of escalated to he's like, "Hey, have you ever been online?" And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" What the hell's online? What are you talking about, fool?
Online?
Yeah, online. He showed me BBSs. So we dialed into some BBSs. That's where I really, cut my teeth on, like, let's get online. So we were dialing into these BBSs, and I was like, what in the world? You can leave messages for people? Like, this is awesome. And freaking, I can go download files, like 5 kilobyte files over, however long. And it was just like, this is crazy. You could share games with people? Like, what? Even if it was shareware that you're sharing back and forth, we didn't even have a consistent place to go get shareware. Like you had to buy magazines.
The shareware was pretty good.
Yeah,
it was like $7 for a magazine to get your disc of shareware, right?
Yeah, right. And even back then, we're still talking floppy disks mostly to get a hold of this stuff. So it opened my eyes to, wow, this is just online community. Like we're digitally communicating, and oh yeah. That eventually led in 5th grade to him showing me AOL and being like, hey, by the way, check this out. So when he was on AOL, he didn't really show me a lot of the wares scene, if you will. We'll just call it the scene. But he spoke about it, and he would show me all the cool things that he got from it. And so it got to the point where I had this 80 megabyte SCSI 2 external hard drive that was like, I don't know, man, like a foot by a foot and a half. Like, it was massive. I don't know how many inches. It was huge. And 80 megabytes, right? And I would put this in my backpack, and I would rollerblade over to his house. And it was actually really funny because, I'm 11 and he's like, I don't know, 14, 15, 16. My mom used to always be like, is he a toucher? No, he's not a toucher. She used to always be like, why does this older dude always want to hang out with you? And it was very hard for me to describe the fact that he's an absolute, socially inept computer nerd. And I love computers, and all he wants is someone to sit there and listen to his dumb computer crap. And all I want in life right now is to listen to his dumb computer crap. It was, oh man, you're going to go hang out with Gary again?
Yeah, Gary Bear,
really funny. Yeah, my buddy. He's my big buddy. Oh my God. But I would go over to his house, and then he would just load up crap on my hard drive, and I'd take it home. He gave me these, back in the day, that Macintosh system used what are known as extensions and control panels. And when the Mac computer would load up, you would actually see, as the OS was booting, at the bottom of your screen, you would see all the different extensions would literally load up an icon. And on many of our scene users' machines, you would see like an entire screen, 640 by 40, if that, right, would be loaded with these icons, and they would slowly load in as they were loaded into memory, right? So he would give me these cool things. Like there was one where Oscar the Grouch would pop up and sing you a song whenever you would empty the trash can. And it was just this, and again, was that something that was hacking? No, you're just modifying, you're just throwing on an extension that some person wrote, right? It's not that big of a deal. But to me, as I was learning about ResEdit and I was learning about digitally communicating with all these people online, and all of a sudden I'm making it so that when I empty my trash, I get a little song sung to me by my childhood. Like, it all just kept interest. I was more and more interested and just wanted to learn as much as I absolutely could. So he introduced me to Dark Castle. If anyone remembers Dark Castle, the game, it was originally on the Mac. It was just amazing. There are many ports over time. The Sega Genesis eventually had a Dark Castle. There are many people who have fond memories of the game. He introduced me to that, and these were all things that he was getting either from BBSs or from AOL when he started using that, and then just sharing with me. He would basically get a bunch of stuff, and over a couple of days, I would show up. He would copy it all over to my stuff, and then he would sit there and just show it to me. Like, here, check this out. Here, have you ever seen Adobe Photoshop? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, look, you can edit stuff. I'm like, what? And it was like this perfect guide to my computing life, that I obtained by moving up to the Silicon Valley and luckily running into this guy.
That's so cool to have somebody to teach you stuff, because if you have to kind of learn it on your own or just like maybe stumble in the chat rooms or something to figure it out, but actually have somebody there to show you that's really awesome. So I have in my notes here EasyScript and OneClick. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So the Mac scene that we had was not as, well, first off, was not as prevalent because, why would it be in terms of just general market saturation and whatever the heck. So we didn't have, like you had the Chronic on previously, right? We didn't have tools like those. Like, we didn't have AOL. Get out of here. Okay. But at one point we got AOL for free. It was called AOL #4 free. And it was basically a tool that you would load in, and it would allow you to use AOL for free. And DeChronic, by the way, was talking about how he actually invented that whole process on the episode, which was fantastic hearing it from his mouth. Essentially, you're in the free area, but you lose the restrictions because you're no longer having windows that are simply invisible, which security-wise, like, great programming, great development, early AOL team, no thought to potential tinkering or hacking whatsoever. But AOL for free would get us on to AOL. Well, that's cute. For free, probably, hence why it has that name. And over time, the Mac community was seen as less than for many reasons, aside that, our games sucked and we weren't on PCs with all the cool software, but we didn't really have progs, if you will. Whether you want to call it whatever term you want to use, let's go with progs for now, right? We didn't have them. So eventually, we had some things. But eventually, a company called West Code Software released a tool called OneClick. And OneClick was a tool that its whole purpose was automation, right? You could build a palette, as they called it, which would be a little floating window on the screen that you could enable or disable with a hotkey or whatever you wanted. And then in that palette, or on those palettes, because you could have multiple loaded, you could then script out activities. So you could basically click on something and then have it perform a series of activities. Well, that scripting methodology was two different engines that were interrelated. One of them was provided by West Code Software. It's called EasyScript. And if you actually go to FOR528.com/OneClick, if you go to that link, it actually redirects to a page. It's still up and live now. I love it. It's on designright.com, and it's called Working with OneClick. So you can probably just Google Working with OneClick, and it would probably be the very, very top thing you'd see there. If you click on it, you'll see what I'm talking about. This is OneClick. You see some images and things of that nature. So for anyone listening, if you don't have a visual, I'll kind of walk through the idea of it, right? You generate palettes, or other people write palettes. You download those palettes and you use them in certain situations. You would have a palette for MS Word. You would have, well, back then, no, it wasn't MS Word. It was more actually ClarisWorks. That was before it was even AppleWorks, before they bought Claris. So I forget what year this is. We're going back in the day. So whatever tool or application you had, you could automate things, right? So anyways, their EasyScript was just that. It was easy. It was very easy to use. And the cool thing about EasyScript, aside from the fact that it really, really aimed to be what I guess some folks probably still call a fourth generation programming language, right? Or is it really a programming, a scripting environment? it's meant to be more like English driven, right? Phrases and sentences that kind of make damn sense. So if you were to look at the example that's on the page I mentioned here, right? Working with one click, the web page is still active on designright.com. There's a section, what's it called? The button editor. And right before it, right below it, you see a script. And the script is really simple, right? The first part of it says on mouse up, and then you have indentation. So that's a function, meaning that whenever the mouse goes up, you do that thing, right? And then the next 3 lines, variable global, the main file. The main file equals process.selection, call process finder drag, end mouse up. So in other words, and the next part, the drag and drop is calling process finder drag. So it's enabling integration with AppleScript, technically, that Apple had provided. And for many years back then, most people had no idea how to use it or what the heck it was. But it was Apple's automation scripting utility and things of that nature. On a current day Macintosh computer, it's literally you just go to automation, the application, and then that's AppleScript. That's how you design automation, right? So this script not only was easy to use, but they had a tab, and you can see it on this website, right? There's a tab called script. And on script, you would then see all the different basically functions or methods, if you will, that were available inside EasyScript, right? And they're all like, there's one called button. And if you provide button and then whatever parameters button wanted, and they would just define, and it was very well documented, right? Here's how you make a button. Here's what that button can do, right? On click, and then assign that to the button. Now the click that. So for anyone who's done old VB form design, you're like, yeah, I get it, dude. I get it. It's VB for the Mac, basically, right? Is what it is. So VB 3.4 status. And so this particular tool, I don't know who came up with it. I don't know who it was in the community and in the Mac scene who was like, hey, we're going to do this now, right? I don't know what the first tool was. I tried to research it. I can't find it. If anyone in the AOL scene, if anyone who listens to this, if anyone in the re-AOL community, whatever, knows or can find out, that would be awesome. But someone at some point was like, hey, I made this tool, but you have to download this software, right? So then everyone started ripping off one click, and that became the norm. And it very quickly became the norm because by the time I heard about it, and I was like on, in the scene every damn day for hours. By the time I heard about it, there were already like 4 or 5 different random palettes floating around. And so using EasyScript, we then had the ability to integrate with AppleScript. And then on top of that, if we wanted to make any type of cutesy little modification to the AOL client itself, we would use ResEdit. And then there were a couple different patching programs back in the Mac days. And ResEdit even had a native method to do it. So I could take ResEdit, I could open up the AOL 3.0, I think this is more the 2.0, right? Days. I also think my years active may have been off. I don't remember. I was in 5th grade, whatever year that was. I think it's around 94-ish, 93, 94. You would basically go in the client, make modifications in ResEdit, save a patch of that, provide the patch, and provide your palette. And then that way, the people who want to use it could apply your patch to their AOL client. And then the AOL client would look as though it's been, modified with all this cool other new stuff. But really, it's just resource fork editing and a visual, cute little tool where you just go double click and you just like, this doesn't no longer says AOL help menu. Now it says, AOL will burn or, whatever. And these palettes over time became more and more advanced. And, let's be honest, the Mac scene is very similar to how I see the Windows development process these days in terms of security features. It all came from Windows. It all came from the Windows scene, right? The PC scene, as they were called back in the day. These days, Microsoft doesn't engineer a lot of their security protections. They get them from the Linux kernel crew. That's who makes them. And then they go, oh, that's cool. And they just rip it. They're like, oh, we're going to do that in our operating system. That's pretty much what we did. So as these palettes started coming out, and as folks like myself who are really interested in, saying programming or development and knowing what I know now as a programmer, right? It's like, come on, dude. Were you really a programmer? But back then, yeah, hell yeah, you were. Absolutely, you were. So being able to manipulate other people's palettes is what immediately drew my attention. And part of that was because it was so often that there was no damn QA on these things. I mean, first off, they're probably all other 5th grade, 6th grade, 11 and 12-year-old kids doing this. Some of the folks like the Chronic was a couple years older than my generation. And so he had a more stable foundation and a better head and his shoulders than, an 11 or 12-year-old kid. But when these things would come out, when things would not work, my immediate thing was, well, that's stupid. Let's fix it. And then I'd fix it. And then I would just use it and be like, okay, cool. And then eventually I got to the point where I was annoyed because you'd have to have 5 or 6 loaded to do the things you wanted to do. So why not make my own? Yeah. And then that's kind of what kicked that off.
So you decided that you were going to make your own palette and group of scripts that went with that palette and then create a patch. Could you have a palette inside the AOL client, or you could just manipulate, I guess you would use ResEdit to manipulate the AOL client, and then you'd have your kind of palette on the side with all of your functions?
Yep, that's it. Yeah, the palette itself would usually be the moniker, but we would also, not all palettes, not all prog developers or whatever you want to call them in our scene, would even manipulate the AOL client with ResEdit. A lot of them were just a palette, and the palette would be just a little floating window, and you could hide it or not hide it, with a hotkey shortcut, whatever. And so these would come out and they would be called whatever the hell, right? There's a number of them that you can find for download. Unfortunately, I didn't have time given some other projects, which I really wish I did, but maybe at some point I'll get some screenshots or like video recording and all that of one-click actively running and some of these palettes that were running. One of them, there's a guy who went by White, and he had a couple different ones that were pretty well known. Some of the earlier ones that were pretty well known. And so anyways, looking through the palettes, I wanted to come up with my own. And so, some would be called something hell, and some would just be called whatever, prog or app or script. It's the same concept in the PC realm. We named it whatever the heck. And I came up with a concept of I wanted one that would save time. I wanted one that would enable me to do what I wanted to do and not enable me to dick around with stupid things in order to do what I wanted to do. So I thought, the 11 or 12-year-old brain was like, I'm going to call it time hell. And the idea is that but when it first started up, I had not yet seen a palette that would animate, if you will, because it was just a palette. It was supposed to be a palette with buttons. But one of the things I found in EasyScript was a way to click on a button or even a keystroke, whatever, right? And what it would do is you could manipulate the buttons and their visibility on the screen and then actually move them pixel wise. So some palette came out with something where it was like a button would go from one place to the other. And then I looked at that and I was like, wait, what? Could we make this like slowly move? Like, will it look like it's animating? It looked like crap. Don't get me wrong, but it could happen. And so I had at first it would pop up and it would just be like a palette with text, and it would say something like welcome to the time vortex. And if you didn't know the key command to press, you wouldn't know, they wouldn't do anything. Or then again, you could just go check the script editor and be like, oh, that's the keys I need to press. Like duh. But if you press the key combination, all of a sudden the buttons would show up. And then someone in the scene found a way to make it so that you could have a palette that would slide out. It would look like it's sliding out. In other words, you could have buttons, but not have the entire thing visible on the palette. So you would just change the size of the palette, basically size and location of it, but it would make it seem like things were sliding out and like different sections, if you will, that were opening up, right? In a VB form, it's much more, of an obvious idea, and it's actually built to design that way with different forms and how they interact with one another. In this case, you're just manipulating what's viewable and what's not at a given time. So my idea behind Time Hell was take all the cool stuff that I had seen, take all the ideas that I had at the time, and it's all the same crap we've seen year after year. It's all the same stupid things, breaking into rooms, a mass mailer, whatever the heck it was. My big thing was not just QA, but error checking, because things either worked or they didn't. And many times they just didn't work, and you had to try them over and over and over and over and over with different people's tools because there was no error handling whatsoever. There's no error checking or error handling. So I found ways to do things like check a window name to see if it spawned within a certain amount of time. And if it didn't spawn, well, that shit didn't work. We're going to try that again. Right. So at the time, I wasn't seeing that a lot. And I thought I had this great idea. We're going to save ourselves time by having our tool check itself, which, again, any developer these days, you're like, yeah, stupid. That's that's how you make a program. Like, what the hell? But we didn't have that back then, at least in the Mac scene. We really didn't. And so I had this idea that I was going to be this amazing tool developer and that I was going to build something that everyone could go, oh, wow, like this really works. And I could get people interested to work with me. And that's one of the things I also wanted to do. It wasn't just build a name for myself, because what 11 to 13-year-old doesn't want to build a name for themselves online? Duh, right? But also it was I want to be part of the community. I want to play with the big boys and gals, right? I want to earn their respect, but I want to work with them. So my thought, and this is, again, the brain of an 11, 12-year-old, was if I show them that I have something that's unique, I could get them to work with me on Time Hell. It may have been a great idea. It may have been a completely asinine, stupid little child idea. I'll never know, because I ran into a major, major problem that eventually shaped who I am today. And that's why we're here with this, essentially this origin story podcast, right? But that was the idea. I had a working tool and I had some error checking. I was looking for window names, and I was also integrating it with Apple Script so that I could play sounds from the AOL client. And I was doing things with ResEdit where I could have a patch to ResEdit where I would add in some S&D files to ResEdit, to the AOL client itself. And then I'd be able to click something in one click and it would manipulate that resource via Apple Script in the client. So it was like I had all these lofty ideas that I wasn't seeing yet in the scene. And I thought I was cool, and then I was gonna be cool. And then I ended up being a fool.
So Surf Kahuna had built a program, and he thought he met a new online buddy, just like how you had a buddy before, right? And this buddy was going to help you beta test it, and then you were gonna, like, everyone would know who Surf Kahuna was, and it would be super awesome, right? That was the plan, and then what happened?
You nailed it 100%. That was the exact plan in my mind at the time. And I wanted to produce something that was polished. So I found someone online. And I wasn't really looking for someone. It was just someone in the scene. And honestly, I don't remember his name. I don't remember where he was from. I don't remember a damn thing about him whatsoever to this day. And I truly believe it is the number one example in my personal life of, as they say, blocking something out. I'm sure that at some point I'll be on a chair in some psychology, some psych's office, and they'll be like, I'm going to count backwards, and I'll be like, his name is John, that bastard. I'm sure, but it's weird that I don't remember much. But what I do remember is we found each other because there was some mass mail, and we were both trying to get on it, and we both didn't get on it. And then we were like, I'll help you get the next one. And he said, I'll help you get the next one. I was like, cool. So if you remember mass mails, it was, this is before before the IRC days, where it'd be like, you type in bang, burp, 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 and, the server will respond to you via DCC chat, and then we could do whatever you want and get your files, right? It didn't work that way on AOL. It was like, hey, I'm doing a mass mail. Type this in. I've got X number of spots available, or it sucks for you. Because you couldn't send mail to X number of people at a time on AOL. I don't remember what that number was. I don't know if you do. But it was something chintzy, right? 50, 100, I don't know what it was, 1,000 even, but whatever it was, you would miss mass mails. So they'd be announced in our certain chats, and if you didn't get on it, you'd be like, damn. And you would think your world was going to end, just because that one mass mail, you'd be like, what was going to be in there? Oh, tools and programs and different progs and porn. Like, you never knew what you were missing out on. So we were trying to help each other out. We started just communicating online, and we started sending each other tools back and forth. And it was someone that I grew to trust over a matter of, back then it took weeks, right? Your best buddies online. So when I decided I'm going to push forward with this, I'm going to spend a lot of time on this, then I brought him in to help me. And he was an amazing resource for beta testing and for giving me feedback. And we worked together for, I want to say it was a solid 6 months, because I was in 6th grade at this time. I was, I guess, 12 going on to 13. If not, actually, by this time I might have been right around 13. Yeah, I was around 13. So I was, and it's funny because I have a daughter who's 11 now, and I'm thinking about all the things I was doing at that age. I'm like, oh, crap. Oh, no. But I had all these things that we were working on, and we were trying to keep it hush-hush. We were not advertising like there's these cool new things we're doing that we're really not seeing, or we weren't really going like, hey, this is going to be the best of the best of the best, because we wanted to be able to say, hey, by the way, this is going to be the best, and you'll see it in like, a couple days. And that's what we were going for. So I had all the faith and trust in the world in this person. And that was misplaced, it turns out. So anyone who grew up on a Mac, or even if you use Macs now as your daily driver, right? Most people think Macs don't get malware, right? How would Mac get malware? There's no Mac malware. Well, viruses back then, I guess I should say. But it turns out that they did. And I really didn't know that. I really didn't focus on that. It wasn't something that was ever a thing to me, right? So I had spent all this time, and just like, I had my baby. I had my little time hell. And I remember I called it version 0.9 beta. 0.9b, because I didn't want to call it 1.0 because it wasn't quite there, but I wanted the masses to see it, and then I was going to use that feedback to make version 1.0. That was a big thing for me. So v0.9 lowercase b. That's the way I styled it. I'll remember it to this day. I can't remember the guy's name, but I remember that. And I was like, here it is. Like, yes. We were going to release it as a stuff it archive. Stuff it that sounds funny to say out loud. That is a term from the old Mac scene. So Stuff It was a group, Aladdin, right? Was who made that?
Yeah, I think so.
A .sit or sit was a compression archive type that the Mac users used for all the way up until basically OS X, to be honest. Like, you'd buy commercial software and it would come as a .sit file on disk sometimes, right? So we didn't use zips. We didn't use tars or gzip. We used sit files. And so in that sit, there was going to be the palette, there was going to be a README, and there was going to be the patch for AOL. And it was going to be as simple as that, right? We were going to start mass mailing it around. We made some ASCII art behind it. Like, I manually did some ASCII art stuff, and time hell version, beta released to the public. And I was just like so excited. Here it is. This is my moment. People are going to know who I am. Yes. Right. Obviously, anyone listening up to this point, you're probably thinking, I never heard of Surf Kahuna or Mac Diablo. Like, who's this fool? Right? I don't think I mentioned Mac Diablo yet. More of that coming up about 5 minutes here. But who the hell was this Surf Kahuna guy? Well, there's a reason you never heard of me. And here it is. We released the software in a mass mail one day, and I was so like emotional that I was like breathing like heavy, and I was just like, oh, here it is. I'm shaking with anticipation, right? And lo and behold, it wasn't very long until the first person started scrolling, not just mentioning, but scrolling, every minute or whatever the hell. And all the damn chats that I was in, that I was popping in and out of, that time hell is a virus, and that Surf Kahuna is trying to basically shut down your PC. They didn't have a solid grasp on really what viruses even were, but so just like, basically, this is pure crap. It's a hoax. Stay away from it. Don't touch it. And it was constantly being scrolled. And I started to freak out immediately for obvious reasons. And I didn't know what the hell was going on. Without going into all the, what happened over the next 48 hours, what basically had happened is that the person I was working with, who I had all the trust and faith in the world in, found a way to implant a virus into time hell. And I was too young, I guess, at the time. Maybe it was just the Mac scene. I never even thought a virus would be a potential problem. And that I didn't even have an antivirus client or agent on my machine. Like, why the hell would I? I was running macOS, early version of macOS 7. Why would I have that? So turns out there was a virus called MDEF. And if you just look up MDEF Apple, you'll probably find, well, yeah, that's actually a data type, but you'll eventually see the MDEF virus. You can also just type in MDEF virus. And it infects the menu definition of resource forks, which is why it was called MDEF, by the way, because MDEF stands for menu define. And it was basically a resource that was included in with the patch that we had provided. And it wasn't necessarily even something that would be a massive problem. If you look up what MDEF does, and you're like, okay, well, that's not that big of a damn deal, right? What the problem is that all of a sudden it was just spitting out on all these machines that this is infected with a virus. That was really the problem, right? So the effects of it's pretty damn simple. Antivirus would pick it up and say that you couldn't remove it, you couldn't fix the problem, and people just started freaking out and stopping and deleting everything. So my mass mails were all shut down. Everything was rebuked, and my name was just completely. Everyone for a minute, definitely in the Mac scene, knew who Surf Kahuna was because he was the asshole who was trying to ruin the scene. That's who I became at the time. And I was trying to do the exact opposite. So you can imagine that it just absolutely blew apart my little world. And I literally had my first occurrence of like depression. When I say like depression, let me replace that with like legit outright damn depression. I wasn't getting out of bed. I was fucked up, dude. It hurt. That shit hurt, man. And I basically trusted someone who I shouldn't have. And I also was not trained enough, intelligent enough, however you want to put it, to recognize what was going on until it was too late. And that's why no one has ever heard of Time Hell. The project completely died after that. It was basically pointless to try to continue in any way, shape, or form. And I was just stuck. You know, I would go online and I would get people instant messaging me, telling me what a piece of shit that I was. And it was just, everything sucked. That was my online persona. Back then I felt like that's who I was in the digital realm, because it was. And that person was seen as a piece of shit in the community. And I had to live with that. And it sounds funny now, but then it was serious. It sucked. It sucked. It sucked a lot.
But then, like a phoenix, you were reborn as Mac Diablo. So you had the idea, like, okay, well, I obviously can't be Surf Kahuna anymore. Did your mom give you the new handle, or did you come up with the Mac Diablo on your own? Or
that sounds funny. It sounds almost like a diss. Like, did your mommy help you with that? First off, yes.
Oh my God. I was joking.
My mommy did help me. Well, that's the funny thing is, like, yeah, she totally did. Now I'm 13. I don't think I was 14 yet, but I'm 13. I still was like, hey, mom, I got to pick a new name. So there's something that we actually passed over that occurred before moving to Mac Diablo. So I'm trying to deal with being this person, and over a number of weeks, people were forgetting, or at least, you know, again, most of the Mac scene, if you ask, do you remember Surf Kahuna? They're not going to even remember. So I guess it wasn't like documented in the annals of, you know, freaking news groups, alt dot whatever AOL, you know, Surf Kahuna is a piece of shit. You know, I didn't get that bad. But I was trying to stick with my name. I was trying to, you know, after being so depressed, my mom was like, I literally went to counseling because of this. Like, wow. No joke. My mom took me to counseling and was like, my kid's all fucked up. What's wrong with my kid? And I was trying to explain to her, but I mean, how's a parent going to understand that? Especially back in those days.
Did she think your buddy had anything to do with this? The one she thought was a toucher? She's like, was it him? Did he do this?
That is so hilarious that you say that. I've never thought about that, but holy shit, I bet she did. Oh my God, that's horrible, dude.
So the virus, is he the virus? What happened?
I know, right? Is he the virus? What did he do to my baby?
What he implant?
I can't wait. Oh, that's good. I can't wait to tell my mom that. She's gonna laugh so hard she's gonna cry. Okay, so I'm trying to stick it out. And then a couple weeks later, you know, this actually may have been a month or two later. I was really trying. You know, I'm literally in counseling at this point. And I'm trying to tell the counselor, like, look, I don't know how to explain this shit to you. So it was the counselor, by the way, who kept trying to tell me, like, well, you just need to, you know, not be that person anymore. Like, just be someone else. And back then, even now, you know, if you work in Infosec, information security, or cybersecurity, like I do now and have for many years, reinventing yourself, that's not a thing. You don't what are you talking about? So anywho, I stick it out, maybe a solid 2+ months after this. All of a sudden, I try to log on to AOL one day, and I can't get online. It says my account has been suspended, right? And I'm like, all the stupid shit that I've done, and all of a sudden I get suspended. Like, what happened? So my assumption was that someone who had to deal with the little virus that I sent to everyone and thought I was just the worst person ever reported me to, you know, TOS or, you know, someone, right? Cat team, whoever the hell, and that got my account suspended, right? That's what I thought. So I call up support, and this is, by the way, probably the best part of this this origin story about dealing with this situation. It's just so stupid. But turns out my account was suspended because it had been used, quote unquote, it had been used, okay, bear with me, in a massive phishing campaign. Now, long story short, without going into all how I found it all out and had to deal with support and how I had to do my research and all this other crap, back in the day, going to Outlook Express and simply just changing the reply to email address and the display name was quote unquote spoofing an email, right? That was like high tech spoofing. This email was sent by Surf Kahuna, and if at AOL.com, and if you hit reply, your reply goes to Surf Kahuna. So obviously Surf Kahuna sent the email, duh. And basically that's what happened. And the phishing attempt, there were emails sent in that manner to thousands of people on AOL. No idea how they were targeted or what that target set was, if they were just people in random, chats, or I never found that out. But people had reported me, and AOL, actually, the support crew read out over the phone. They're like, yeah, here's the email. And they started reading it out. And it was just a perfect example of 90s phishing, but it wasn't just for passwords. It was for the entire fucking personal identities of people. So it was saying something about a government program that you're in violation of. And in order to fix that, you have to send the following. And the following was like, fucking might as well send a blood and stool sample, man. Like, it was everything, dude. We're talking like name, last 3 living locations, social security number, any credit cards you have, their credit card numbers. It wasn't just one credit card. Like, what do you use to pay for AOL? No. It was like everything. Something that you'd think 99% of people, at least in this day, would see and be like, are you kidding me? Like, this is so stupid. Well, okay, so I had to fight against the fact that I didn't do that. That's one. And I had to do it with support on the line. I was very surprised. I actually got them eventually to decide, you did not do this. Their fix to you did not do. Now, keep in mind, my name had been dragged through the mud, and I was the asshole of the community, of the Mac community, right? I'm hoping, but also not hoping, that some listener out there is going, oh, you're that asshole? You're a surfer? I'm like, no, I really wasn't an asshole. I swear I wasn't an asshole. But, I went from that to now this. And so now I'm like, well, that's cool. Like, even further so, Surf Kahuna, whoever that is a massive piece of shit, right? It's just a horrible human being. Like, fucking great. So, and the Shyamalan twist, I did it all. I'm kidding.
So wait, this is just like mail header. Like, so I mean, actually, that's part of the RFC, right? The reply to and all that. And if they looked at the headers, like they did regular forensics, they would know.
They saw blatantly, yeah, exactly. They saw blatantly where it actually originated, and not at all was.
But somebody took the time to collect all of these names.
Yep.
And then they decided, I'm going to write this email. So it almost sounds like somebody had like a Mac termer or something, and they like clicked the term button on you, and then it just sent a bunch of emails.
Yep. And some of you may have already guessed, but guess who it was?
Oh, so this is not the same. This is not the original virus guy. You're saying this is another person who was mad at you for.
No, it was. It was the original virus guy. He came back to make my life even more miserable. I found out eventually.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was someone who was pissed about the virus thing. I thought it was someone who I didn't know. It turns out that this buddy I had online, I have no idea to this day what the hell I did to this person. I was young, I was eager, and I was hungry. And I was like, if I learned something, and when we were working together, it's like, look what I found. And then, what did you find today? Like, there was nothing, I wasn't a dickish child. You know what I mean? Like, I just wanted to learn and be cool. I wanted to be cool. And this dude, for whatever reason, decided, like, fuck Ryan. Like, fuck Ryan. We're going to drag this dude into the dirt. I still don't know what bug got in this guy's, ass. But so anyways, the AOL support team eventually decided you can have your account back. They re-enabled my account. I go to log into my account, and I'm finally, it took a while, a week or two, I think, to get, and I'm calling them multiple times a day. I was a kid. That's all I had to do, right?
Hey, it's Ryan again. I really need to get on the internet today.
Yeah, I said, what the fuck's going on? No, don't get me wrong. We had, account generators, and we had, one of the things that will never leave my memory is the Visa cert number 4019. 4019 was one of the most common seed generation numbers that we'd use for credit card generation back in the, at least in the Mac scene. So I always remember 4019, and I had a couple different algorithms and tools I would use. I had accounts at the yin yang, right? I could get on AOL. I wanted my damn account back. That's what I wanted. And so I get my account back. I log in. My mailbox is full. I go, what? I click on my mailbox, and there are a ton, whatever the maximum amount of email you could have in an AOL inbox was. That's what I had. And it was, I'm making this percentage up, but it was like 90%, fuck you, you're a piece of shit, die in a fire, I've reported you to the FBI, I've told AOL, all this other, whatever. And say 10%, like there were hundreds of replies that gave me all the fucking information. I'm not shitting you here. And I don't mean like someone's like, wow, here's my social and my address, but for the rest of it, no. I mean, I had so much PII in my inbox, so much. AOL didn't do a damn thing to try to delete it. And the funny thing was, the first thing I did is I called them, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? As at the time, 13, maybe 14-year-old, I'm just like, how stupid are you guys? Like, what are you doing? So that was one thing. I immediately started to realize, well, this name has really got to go now, right? There's no way I can continue to be this person. Because then whenever I was online with that account, I would get instant messages, and I was no longer getting it from the scene. I was now getting it from these people who were phished. Right? Whether it was successful. I had some people just being like, hey, is that all taken care of? Like, I gave you all my shit.
What did you say to them?
I never responded to any of them. I didn't know what the hell to say, and I was basically scared of legal shit. I didn't know what to deal with at that age. I was like, let me just let AOL know. And my mom was like, I told my mom all about this shit. I was like, this could be like, I don't know if I'm going to get arrested. Like, I don't know, but I don't know what the hell to expect. So she started taking notes. She started contacting lawyers. Like, we didn't know what the hell to do at the time,
What kind of idiot sends information to somebody named Surf Kahuna?
Oh my
God.
God.
Oh, this seems legitimate. Just send it to Surf Kahuna.
So much information. Oh my God. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I already double clicked on one of these, and I just read through it. Holy shit, dude, this is like I could trace your fucking family lineage with it. Like, it was so crazy. So I start mass deleting the emails, and then more come in. I mass delete, more come in. They're still coming in. And I'm like, what the fuck? So I don't remember back in AOL. I don't remember if someone had a full email box and you tried to email them, would it tell you their email was full? Would it take the email and then SMTP would queue it for delivery later? I don't remember how their email system worked.
But there's the mail bombs, right? The whole point of the mail bomb was to fill up your mailbox so you couldn't get any more
Yes,
email.
exactly.
The retry is like 72 hours, right, for SMTP.
I don't remember how they had their relays set up. I'm saying I don't remember. I didn't know at the time. I work in cybersecurity now. I deal with SMTP relays and phishing attacks all the fucking time. But back then, I had no idea how that all worked. All I know is that, 2 weeks after the fact, I finally get my account back. I delete whatever 1,000, 10,000, whatever it was, emails, and they keep fucking rolling in. And I'm talking rolling in like the, fuck you piece of trash, and the, here's all my information. They just kept rolling in. So I eventually called in. My mom got on the phone. She started talking, legal bullshit like a parent who's freaking the hell out, especially in the 90s, right? Would do in this situation. Duh. And eventually they were like, do you want to just like shut this shit down? I'm like, yes, fucking kill it with fire. That is what led to me and my mommy coming up with the name Mac Diablo. Mac Diablo came from so she was trying to push the concept. See, I remember a lot of these things, and I don't remember the fucking guy's name who completely destroyed me as a child. Right, who destroyed not just my online Ryan, but like me as a person for a solid year. This fucked my little world up. God, it sounds sad saying it out loud, but I mean, that's why we're here, right? To tell the story. So she was all about Phoenix. You're the rising Phoenix out of the ashes. That makes sense, right? And I was like, I don't want to be a fucking bird. So what we came up with together was that I was going to be the Macintosh devil. And where that really came from was I felt like a fucking victim because I was an absolute victim, which, by the way, some people might be piecing together, oh shit, this guy works incident response these days. He helps victims. Yeah, no shit. Like, that's where I'm getting with this. But I was an absolute online victim, right? And I wanted to not have a victim persona. So I didn't want to be the Phoenix who was beaten and battered and all that shit. I wanted to be the Mac Devil. I wanted to have a bit of panache to the name, if you will. And so I came up with Mac Diablo. And my mom and I, came up with Mac Diablo. I made that name. I popped into the scene and I took a back seat from that point. I did not engage with anyone. I didn't trust anyone. I learned from that overall experience, many, they were negative at the time, but ended up being very positive things. But it destroyed who I was in that environment. Eventually, when I moved over to IRC/Hotline, oh gosh, Hotline was the business. When I moved away from AOL, or actually for a while, I was still using AOL as my ISP before I got DSL. So don't get me wrong, I was still dialing in, right? But I was using then the PPP Connect, peer-to-peer Connect on the old Mac days, to actually just connect to quote unquote the internet, right? Not AOL's internet. And started doing Hotline and IRC stuff. Anyway, when I moved over there, then that's when I let Mac Diablo shine wherever I could, and I would engage with people and I was communicative and all that. Very few people, I never wanted anyone to know, never, not a damn person outside of me and my mommy, that Mac Diablo was Surf Kahuna, because to me, that was just, like it was a burned identity, just like a special agent's like, nah, that's burn, man. Like that was beyond burn. And I never wanted it to relate. And this is the first time I've ever even publicly been like, yeah, this is exactly what happened. This is how stupid it was. But yet this is how much it affected me at that young age.
I'm sure you've thought about the motive behind this, but just as an outsider listening to it, it's almost like, sure, you guys both missed the same ass mail, right? So you had something in common, right? And then you mentioned your program, you sent it to him and stuff, and either one, he was jealous, or two, he just thought you were annoying, and he's like, I'm just gonna fuck with this kid, right? And I'm guessing it had to be one or the other. And then, like, on your big day, either that or he just, he enjoyed making people suffer, right? And maybe he thought he was like some cool like hacker guy, right? So that virus is what, like the second virus for Macintosh too? So like they were pretty new, right?
It was also an old virus at the time. It came out, 90, 89, 90, or whatever the hell. It was not even, like, it's hard to explain. It's not like someone these days dropped Imitet, Hanseter, Iced ID, Quackbot, whatever the fucking things I deal with every day, right? Onto a system, and it was a remote access and info stealer and a Trojan and just, led to ransomware attacks and all this shit, right? No, it was just some stupid, dumbass little thing. And it was just the fact that it was Symantec that first picked it up. By the first user I saw that said, hey, here's what this is. Be careful. It was a Symantec report. No, it wasn't. I'm sorry. They bought Norton Utilities. So I forgot what year we were in. It was a Norton little thing that was like, hey, MDEF.C or .D or whichever version it was.
How did his stuff get in your program? I thought you were the programmer.
Well, I was, but I was not paying attention to the patch file. All of a sudden having a new...
So he gave you a patch?
Well, when I was giving him stuff for beta testing, he basically just added the data into it. I have no idea how he added it into it. My assumption is that, the way that you would do that back in the Macintosh days is you would literally open up two programs in ResEdit. You'd copy one of the MDEF resources, you'd do copy, and then drag it over to the other one, and fucking now it would be in that tool. That's the way you would do it. So everything that we discussed pre-show, we didn't talk about motive at all. But everything you just said right now, you nailed it. That's exactly what my mom and I were mulling over. Was it that I was over enthusiastic and I became annoying and I was asking for too much assistance? Was it literally a jealousy thing? Was my stuff that cool, or like what the hell was it? I'll never know to this day. Unless he's randomly listening here and sends me a message and say, hey, I'm the guy that fucked you over when you were a kid.
Yeah, fuck you.
Here's why. Like, I'll never, yeah, fuck you. That's why I did it. I'll never know. I don't know. I have no idea.
Because I can.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess I need to know more about the quote virus or whatever. Does it like replicate on its own, or does somebody manually you're saying someone has to manually copy it over and put it in a program, or does it infect stuff on its own? Like, how does it work? Because I mean, what if he didn't do it at all? What if his computer was just infected and he sent it back to you?
Oh, so here's the thing about that. I also don't know if that's the case. After he sent the mass mail bomb out, right? He told me that he did it.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Because I came back online and I messaged him and I was like, dude, you would never believe what just happened. And he goes, oh, I know. And he told me, and I'm like, what the fuck? And he actually, this is where it gets kind of weird, I guess. He gave me his phone number and he's like, call me. And this is where it goes. I have so many fond memories and very specific things about this exact time frame in my life. I had a zip drive. I know what my folder structure of those fucking zip drives were like. I actually have 6 zip disks, which I haven't had a chance to review. And I'm going to shit myself if I find some cool old AOL stuff on there, by the way. But I remember all these things. I don't remember his name, his voice, where he lived, any of this crap. He gave me a phone number, and it was somewhere in the Midwest. I remember that. And I called him. And when I called him, he told me, he's like, yeah, I sent that mail out. Did it suck for you or something like that? And then he hung up. I tried to call back. I tried to call that motherfucker like 5 times a day for a month. I never got through back to him. It would just always ring. I don't know what that was about, but I'll never know. I never know. But what I left, when I left the scene, right, that those experiences stuck with me and eventually molded who I am now. My job, my career is my hobby. My hobby is my career. My personal life, I don't have a fucking personal life. I work in cybersecurity. Like, before this podcast, I was on a call for work. And after this podcast, I have projects that will probably take me to 1 a.m. in the morning to work on outside of my day job because I do too many fucking things in cybersecurity, right? Like, I live and breathe this shit. And where did it all really begin? Well, I learned how to use computers from my dad, and I didn't see my dad a lot. And when I did, I wanted to impress him. That sounds a little sad, but I mean, that's how fucking divorced families work, right? You see the other parent, you're like, hey, fucking, I'm cool, look at me, right? And I wanted to learn all I could about computers, and I loved them. And he loved them too, and that was motivating. And then I met Gary, and he showed me all this cool shit, and I was just like, fucking whoa! I'm like, mind blown, dude. My guide to the cyber universe, fucking cool. And then I lost Gary because we had to move away. And I just remember when you said, when I went into fucking counseling, if my mom was like, was it Gary? I can't believe she never asked. I'm going to call her as soon as we're done here and be like, oh my God, you got to hear this. I move away, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, let me just, do this more online stuff more myself. And then I find, oh, this is all the shit he was talking about. This is the wares scene. And I'm like, well, this doesn't apply to me. I'm on a Mac. Like, how do I find and then I find it. And then I go down that route, for the next year or two as I move into, I guess, 7th grade at the time. So then, 13, maybe 14. I think maybe the early 14. And I go down this path, I build this tool, and I just get reamed and I lose all sense of hope. What did I really learn in all of this? There's 2 major things that those experiences, my experiences on AOL, really pushed into my brain. One of them was about trust and who you can or cannot trust and giving trust too early. And for that matter, understanding that just because you think you understand someone, there are some fucking shitty people in this world. And those shitty ass people will hurt people. And it's not just, don't get me wrong. I grew up in a rough town, right? Fights were common. We had a lot of fucking gang violence. There were migrant worker faction and their crew and our crews, we'd fight. Like and I wasn't in a gang, but like on the north and south side of my town where I live, north and east, there was constant stabbings and shootings and killings and murders and fucking gangland shit. At one point we had a murder rate that was almost on par with Detroit, and we were a little fucking farming town. It was a fucked up town. But that's not where I learned how people were fucked up. I learned that people could be fucked up when my little heart got broken on AOL. That's where I learned it. So I learned that. And I also learned that, holy shit, viruses and malware can be so detrimental to your computing life. Now, keep in mind, I'm just some dumbass little, at the time, 11 to 13, maybe 14-year-old kid, right? That's it. And this virus, did it really cause? No. By the way, it can self-replicate. I don't know if I finished answering that question. I apologize. It's just some dumbass little resource thing. It didn't even cause that big of a fucking problem. And it could be weaponized technically to do some other fun stuff. There was another virus around that time. I mean, if you look up classic Mac viruses, you'll see there were literally a handful that were well known. So I've always, in the back of my mind, no matter what I did after this shit, no matter what I did, in the back of my mind, it was, I was in this scene, and I'm still in hotline MIRC, right? Realm. And I was using MIRC, but we were in the IRC realm. And well, first off, that's bullshit. No, I wasn't. I was on a Mac. I don't remember what the hell I was using off the top of my head, which is really weird. But I was mostly on hotline. So anyway, I was using soft Windows from Connectix, also from the webcam folks, to run Windows. And then I was using MIRC inside of that. So I used to emulate Windows on my Mac back in the day before, like, it was common for emulation and virtualization, right? Is what I meant to say, was common. Today, like, I'm running 4 VMs right now, 2 Linux, a Unix, and fucking Windows, right? That's what we do. But back then, I was like, this is cool, I'm running Windows. Anywho, pulling back, I was going forward, whatever I did, it was very hard to trust, and it was very hard to disassociate the hacker mentality, the scene mentality, with the concept of a hacker that the media portrays. Like, what's a hacker? Well, like, a hacker's a piece of shit, right? I mean, I literally work to stop hackers every day. That's what I do. I don't stop hackers. I stop threat actors, right? That's what I do. A hacker, we're all hackers. Shit. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, we get to, well, what's a hacker mean? Point being is, we were doing shit. We were stealing music. And, throughout junior high and high school, I made a ton of money. We didn't have a lot of money. We were on government assistance and shit like that. But I had a lot of fucking cash. And the reason I did is because I sold music CDs when I got my first CDR. I was installing mod chips in PlayStation 1s. I was the only guy in the school for a while that could even solder. I was selling VCDs, and I was selling VCD attachment players for PlayStation 1. I used to get them from licksang.com for many of you other folks. By the way, another big passion in my life is retro gaming. You can actually see right now, this is audio only, but you can see all my gaming consoles behind me and shit on the walls. I've got Super Metroid painted on my wall, right? My dad taught me video game shit too. It was video games and computers. So that kind of shows you where I grabbed onto those, right? Over time, I was getting into the cracking scene. And I was really, really getting into, like, fuck ResEdit. Like, let's learn about MaxBug. Let's learn about a proper fucking debugger and a kernel level debugger at that. And in the Windows realm, I started learning about soft ice. You could just hold down Control and press D and drop into the debugger and fucking manipulate whatever you wanted. And I was, following tutorials online and shit like that. But I was learning how to crack, and I was, wares was a huge thing. And I would sell shit, but we're well past 7 years for anyone listening. Like, wait a minute, arrest this man. No one cares anymore. I was selling, like, Dragon Naturally Speaking. I was selling it to doctors because I was dating this girl whose father was a doctor. And one day he mentioned, I wish I had a tool to blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I can give you that. And then he's like, oh, how much? And I'm like, how much? I'll just give it to you. But instead what I said was $400 because it was like 1,000 at the time or some stupid shit. And then I sold it to, like, every doctor he knew. And I made a ton of fucking money in high school. But we're on government Section 8 housing, if anyone's familiar with Section 8, right? And yet I'm fucking, like, I have big ass subwoofers in my car. Like, where'd those come from? Well, they came from stealing shit online, but it was online. I didn't think it was a problem, right? Like, who gives a shit that I'm stealing music online, So over time, as I get out of high school, I start to then realize that some of the things I'm looking at in the cracking scene have now evolved to me being interested in exploitation and software exploits. And I was starting to think about getting into exploit writing. I thought that I was going to be what we call these days a penetration tester, or a red team, a pen tester, right? Breaking into software and systems and whatever in order to help companies identify, like, hey, there's a weakness, to fucking go fix it, right? I thought that the more I started getting into that particular part of the scene, the more I realized these aren't the kind of people that I actually want to hang around with. Because a lot of these, and keep in mind, it was not like we have now, where we have a red team open environment and people are like, yeah, I hack shit, I break shit, and then I report to the clients or companies, I get bug report money, or I work as a pen tester for my organization. That shit didn't exist at that time. This was rather people who were fucking people over. And I was learning more how to exploit software as opposed to just, manipulate in a debugger, like bypass, a serial number being entered or some stupid shit like that. And as I started thinking more and more and more, I was like, you know what? Some of these people fucking suck. And some of these people remind me of numbnuts from AOL. I'm going to call them numbnuts now from AOL. And I had always fucking hated malware. And as it became more, by the way, from the term virus to malware, and as we started to get the worm shit in the early 2000s that decimated Windows environments and, blaster worm and all that type of shit, I started thinking more and more like, fuck me, dude. Numbnuts from back in my day, that's this dude grown up. That's this dude now. That's what this dude's doing. He's taking down companies and royally fucking them over. So you fast forward, I was a technical trainer in a call center environment for 6, almost 7 years. During that time, I was going to school for cybersecurity. Why was I going to school for cybersecurity? Well, at this point, you probably know, like, no shit, because I didn't want people to have to deal with this shit. Like, it fucking sucked for me, man. And eventually, I get a job in a security operations center, which was about 10 and a half years ago now. And it just happened to be, I got really lucky. One of the largest companies in the world, a government contractor. We built nuclear facilities, actually quite a bit of nuclear facilities, like you name it, big fucking massive tens of billions of dollar project. That's what my former company built. I won't say their name, but if you just fucking go to LinkedIn, you'll be like, oh, there it is. Like, duh, it's right there. All right. Most people have not heard of the company that I worked for, but if you've heard of Halliburton, same fucking concept. So working at that company from day one, I dealt with real threat actors, not some numbnuts from AOL, but really fucked up people. And it was immediate, was holy shit, this is what I am destined to do. And what led me to that? My time on AOL, my time learning how to develop and script, right, whatever, but develop and program, make my own thing, be happy and proud of my baby, and then have that completely shit on by someone that I trusted. Not just someone that I trusted, but someone just in general as part of the scene, right? So I spent time in that security operations center and computer incident response team for like a month shy of 7 years. And then about 3 years ago, actually in a week from today, it'll be 3 years, I moved over to consulting. I currently work for BlackBerry. And yes, if anyone listening just did a double take and said BlackBerry, you mean like that BlackBerry? Yeah, that one. So I worked for BlackBerry. I worked for a company called Silence. I was hired on by Silence. And by the way, we were purchased by BlackBerry like right when I got hired by Silence. So I didn't specifically get hired onto BlackBerry. I was looking for an antivirus company that had professional services to stop hackers. And I found Silence, and it was, artificial intelligence fueled products. And then we also did professional services. That led to me working at BlackBerry. For the past 3 years now, I work IR. And when I say IR, the number one thing that I deal with these days is ransomware. And the number one thing that you can just absolutely fucking destroy a company's hopes and dreams these days is ransomware, right? We work advanced persistent threat cases. So certain countries that may be active and and aggressive and attacking other countries. I almost said one of their names. I think we all know who the top two are. There's really a top three, and the rest are all still shitty too. So I've worked those cases. I've worked some high level espionage shit, especially at my last job.
When you say espionage, what does espionage entail?
Oh, yeah. I do so many presentations in the cyber realm. I forget that this is not specifically a cyber audience. So the term advanced persistent threat, or APT, it refers to, or is supposed to, and the media screws it up, but it's supposed to refer to nation state sponsored attack groups. And let's not bullshit, right? It's China, Russia, and Iran. Those are the three big ones, very big ones. They're really fucking good at breaking into environments and targeting organizations and and countries that are non-friendly with them. The United States being like number one in that regard. And these organizations are they're government funded. The PLA in China, for example, that's the major branch of their army. They have multiple organizations and groups that form their military, right? The PLA, People's Republic, fucking Libertarian, whatever the hell it's called. I just blanked on PLA. And then Russian has the GRU stuff. It's all their, we have the 3 letters. They have their own 3 letters, NSA, FBI, CIA, all that type of shit. The attacks that they carry out are to better their environment and their place in the world. And they carry out cyber warfare, basically. And so some of the stuff I deal with is that shit. And so for the most part, these days I deal with ransomware. Like I just finished writing a 4-day ransomware course that's specific on incident response, how to deal, and like for large groups, right? Like, companies like who I worked for, all the way down to a dentist's office or a mom and pop shop. It's like, shit, we got ransomware. What do we do? That for the IT side, that is.
So we got ransomware. Is that like, okay, I see a ransomware message, or is it like my EDR just popped for Emotet on a domain controller, but I'm not encrypted yet? Is it all of that, or?
Yeah, all the above. Yeah, the course that I wrote, it's for anyone who might be familiar, it's for a company called the SANS Institute. It's a technical training organization where you go and you pay a bunch of money for like 4 to 6 day courses. So this is a course that's designed for incident responders or for people who are working in IT and may someday have to deal with ransomware. In the course and what we do at my day job, right? If we call $ day job like a variable in programming, right? My day job is we deal with teaching people how to hunt for ransomware operators who may already be in your environment. So if you're not yet encrypted, but you already have been penetrated and you're like, oh shit, right? If you're being encrypted, like right fucking now, like literally encryption events are running, which by the way, you're way too late to the party at that point. You're already so fucked. Or whether you just were encrypted, like all the above are things that we deal with in this course. So, and that's what we do on a daily basis, right? At my job. And so the nation state sponsored stuff, an example for anyone who wants to learn about that type of thing, just because it's so fucking interesting, is just look up APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, and the number 1 space report. You'll find a report that was published back in 2012 from a company called Mandiant. Mandiant's now known as FireEye, by the way. If you read this report, you can grab the report. It's like 70 pages, and it is a dossier on how one of the PLA groups, so basically the Chinese military, right? How they had a group of hundreds of men who sat there and hacked against other nations, primarily the United States, 9 to 5 every day for years at a time. So my first case I ever worked was an APT1 case. And I thought I was going to be dealing with, like online fraud shit, 13-year-olds who get screwed over, like start slow. Nope. Right into the fire. So if anyone is like, what the hell do these cyber defense, cyber crime, and incident response folks really have to deal with? Read that APT1 report. It'll blow your fucking mind. And it is 10 years old at this point. But I'm telling you, you'll be like, this shit's real? Like, this isn't just TV? Fuck no. This is 10 years old. The amount of shit we've dealt with since then is way beyond this kind of crap. But it's like just reading, you'll see names and pictures and buildings and locations and generals and their trainers and the names of strings that were identified in their malware that were used to piece them together and weave the, basically draw out the picture of the attack and go like, oh shit, this is actually associated with this telecom that is in Shanghai that use it. Like it's, I'm telling you, it'll blow your fucking mind. I love that report. It's what really told me, holy shit, I really am in the right place. Anyway, the espionage stuff, if you, for example, China has what's known as a 5-year plan. And if you look up China 5-year plan, you'll find a Wikipedia article called 5-Year Plans of China. And it's really, really simple concept. Every 5 years, the government of China puts out new mandates and basically states, over the next 5 years, we're going to do the following things in order to strengthen and bolster our position in the world. That's what this is. That's what these reports are, these plans. These plans, this is China we're talking about, by the way. These plans are not like, hey, we want to do this stuff, right? These plans are like, this is what we're fucking doing, and get it done. And the get it done is like all the large, organizations throughout all of China. Like this is essentially, it's not a mandate, but it's a fucking mandate. So if you look at a lot of stuff they want to do, they try to increase the number of rail system that they have, number of feet of rail. They try to increase the economy financially by X% or whatever. In order to achieve a lot of these things, they basically use cyber espionage. And that's why we hear so often that China and Russia, they're all hackers. Well, why is that? It's because their governments, not openly per se, but like at this point, everyone knows no shit that their governments are like, yeah, look, just do it that way. Right? Like, well, it's going to be hard to, get all this shit done. But there's these, governments in London and Australia and the US, whatever. They've got these crazy liquid natural gas projects. Let's do some of that shit. How do we do it? I don't know. Go steal their shit. They just go steal their shit. That's basically what, where a lot of our cybersecurity folks are dealing with. That's how they do it. That's how they plan this shit out, and they go and do it.
So that's what's driving this. So I was wondering, like, why is China keep stealing intellectual property? And so it's because of these 5-year plans. Okay, that all makes sense now.
Yeah, for China, a big part of it is the 5-year plans. This is all shit that I learned like the first month that I moved into what I call hands-on security, but moving into a security operations center where we're getting malware alerts, like you mentioned, EDR or whatever, antivirus, whatever logs you have, firewall, all the shit that's coming in and saying like, hey, fucking, there's a problem, or like, hey, what's that? That kind of thing. The more that we look into why is hacking into, let's just focus on the United States for right now. Actually, no, fuck that. Let's go the United States and London, and for that matter, Canada, because it's the top 3, especially like targets for ransomware. Ransomware is financial motivation. That's e-crime. It's still e-crime, but let's pull back from that and talk about the espionage. Their big thing is we want to be a world power. First off, they are a world power. We want to maintain and or be a bigger world power, right? How do we do that? Well, one way is to provide the opportunities to organizations throughout, construction has to complete X number of domestic unit to house X number of the population to increase, so we have fewer homeless, like all these types of things that decide where your stature as a country, right? In China, many of them are defined in their 5-year plans. And the thing is that there's methods that you use to go about increasing those things, right? And one of the methods that China, Russia, and Iran are very well known to use is cyber espionage. They're like, well, we need to be a world power. And if these other countries have amazing, cool shit, especially stuff we don't have, let's just go take it. Like, then we'll just start doing some of that too. And then we'll be even better. That's basically all it is. I know it sounds silly the way I'm saying it, but that's what it is. In fact, if you do China 5-year plan and then click images, I believe, well, the very first one that I see is from globaltimes.cn. And it says major targets of China's 14th 5-year plan, which is from 21 to 25. So 3 more years on that guy, right? Number 1, keep major economic indicators within an appropriate range. Okay. Don't lose a lot of money and keep fiscally saturated. Like, all right. Number 2, above 7% annual growth in research and development spending. So let's break that down. We want to above 7% growth in research and development spending. What's that really fueling? Research and development, R&D, right? What the hell is R&D? Well, that's what we're just talking about, right? How do you really increase research and development in all sectors or verticals or whatever you want to call them? It's the intellectual property. And where can you get intellectual property? Well, you have to grow it. No shit. No, you don't. You can just go steal it too. I can just go steal that shit. So let's just train a bunch of people to be hackers, have them work a 9-to-5 job, that literally hacking into organizations around the world and steal their shit. So as you read through some of these 5-year plans and you start to think, how could breaking into other countries' businesses and stealing their intellectual property? I'm saying stealing. They're not taking it and not. I mean, they're stealing the confidentiality. They're screwing with the confidentiality of it. Yeah, exactly. Just copying your shit. No big deal, bro. Just let me copy off your paper.
It's just a copy.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody wants something really good to read, check out Operation Aurora when China got into Google. And that was like a year or 2 after the Mandiant report, but that was pretty interesting.
Yes. So Operation Aurora, the threat actor who carried out Operation Aurora, I was involved in an incident with the exact crew, and it was maybe a year after Operation Aurora, and different groups have different names, different companies in the United States mostly have different names for threat actors. They might like Mandiant. They now just call them APT and a number. So you'll see APT1, APT3, APT37, 38, and 39 are Iranian. They call them the kitty groups, by the way. Panda will be the Chinese-based groups and shit like that. So what was my point? My point was these attacks have absolutely not stopped. And the Aurora one specifically, I'm going to say I got to, because to me, it was like living a movie. You know, I got to work a case with these folks. And this kind of stuff, that APT1 and the Aurora operations, when you read full reports like that APT1 report, like that's the shit that, you know, that really got me motivated. Like you take that dickhead on AOL, you evolve, you know, Ryan, who I am over the years, and I'm like, fuck that guy. Like his whole purpose is just to fuck people over and destroy them. And that's what these threat actors do. And that's why I am who I am. You know, do I sell movies and shit like that anymore to make a profit myself? No, I hopefully have a career that I don't need to sell a fucking $5 movie online. You know, that guy I fucking got from a torrent, right? But at the same time, it's like you look at these exploit writers who are on these darknet forums. I'm not in there talking with them about, oh, look, I found another Stack Overflow and a rock chain gadget to fuck over a VMware product. Let's use it to bring down companies and install ransomware. Fuck that. Rather, I'm like, hey, some asshole is exploiting known vulnerabilities in VMware Horizon. You know, let's go fucking help people who have that system and are about to be hit or have just been hit. Like, fuck that AOL guy. fuck the AOL guy, basically. So, yeah, the whole, you know, without diverging too much, the whole concept of being on the cast, and by the way, thank you so much for having me on. It was really fun talking with you here. It's an origin story of how much AOL meant to me and what it did for me as a person. And some folks may listen and be like, oh, he's not talking about, you know, crazy, cool, proggy shit that I remember. Like, no, I'm not. I'm talking about my experiences and how it made me who I am. We're all a community. We're a community, whether we recognize it or not. You obviously fucking recognize it because you have a whole podcast around it, right? That's why we're here. Duh. You know, I listened to every damn one of your episodes, maybe twice each, and I was just enthralled by every fucking one of them. I didn't know some of the names, but I didn't give a shit. I was like, it's fucking awesome. Being able to peek behind that curtain, right? Some people originally are like, Ryan, Surf Kahuna and Mac Diablo. No one remembers that guy. No, you don't. That's the whole point of the podcast. You absolutely don't. Why? Because I thought you were going to know me, at least in the Mac scene, and then shit didn't work out. And that led to me dealing with, you know, attacks to bolster, to facilitate meeting China's 5-year plans and, you know, working to stop ransomware attacks. You know, that's it. It all started there. It really did. And as a community, we've lost sight of our community for the most part, right? AOLers. But now we really haven't. We're reinvigorating it. You're reinvigorating it. Shit, your podcast is fucking awesome. On top of that, we've got the Re-AOL project. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what the hell? You and I we talked in there, I believe, the first time, right? On their Discord server. I was like, hey, and we started, you know, chatting. Like, we're bringing together folks who have these shared experiences. Now, I really hope people didn't have a shitty experience as I did in the scene. And it may seem like I'm saying my time there was negative overall. Fuck no, it wasn't negative. I learned to script, or if you want to call it program. I eventually, you know, learned how to use Code Warrior and write C-based programs for the Mac. I started tuning and fine-tuning my IT skill sets, which led to a career that I have now that I fucking love. I am obsessed with what I do. Too obsessed if you ask my wife and family, but there was a lot of good, but there was also those big moments, and they were very impactful to me in my life. And it's all from the AOL scene. The more that we come together as a community, the more that we have more of your damn episodes in this podcast. Like, keep them coming, damn it. The more that we have communications going on with Re-AOL, the more I can log on to AOL and hear welcome again and be like, oh shit, you know, the more that we can just get back to that community feeling, or at least maybe establish a kind of a new age one, you know, but with that common thread. And that means a lot to a lot of us. And so, yeah, that's my spiel.
Yeah, it definitely does. And hopefully there's a little more trust. But you have to wonder, like, if what happened to you happened today, right? Would it have been like, would you have gotten swatted? right? Or something like that. Because that dude seems maniacal enough, right? That he would.
100%. I was just watching one of the speedrunner. I love, like I said, retro gaming, right? I watch a lot of fucking speed runs. Oh my God. So if anyone is familiar with speed running a video game, or usually it's well, not usually, but there's classic games that take the bulk of it, but there's new age games that people try to get through as fast as possible, Are you familiar with awesome games done quick?
No, I am familiar with speedrunning though. I've seen the Super Mario's and then like the Link Breath of the Wild one and all that.
Yeah. Okay, I love all that. The tech they come up with, by the way. Oh, don't even get me started. There's one group that run a project called TaskBot. TAS stands for Tool Assisted Speedrunning, and TaskBot is a piece of hardware basically that's been designed to relay inputs into classic consoles of yesteryear, and they're able to essentially speedrun at the like the fastest rate possible that wouldn't even be close to humanly possible. Well, TaskBot is also able to manipulate and to exploit the software running on older consoles and take over the console and obtain remote code execution. So you can literally have, anyways, I'm getting carried away with the TaskBot thing, but just check it out. Check it out. TaskBot Plays or whatever, and games done quick. If anyone's into like retro gaming and into like finding the kind of stuff that I do and dealing with people who are exploiting systems and breaking shit and being bad peoples, right? What's that look like when you're doing it for fun, but on a Super Nintendo or a Nintendo 64, and all of a sudden you've got an R-Wing flying around in Ocarina of Time, or all of a sudden you have Ocarina of Time running on a standard N64 system, a non-modified N64, and all of a sudden you've got a new cutscene that pops up because they remotely injected code into the system by just pressing controller buttons and sending that input into the system, and you have Twitch chat live displayed on a Nintendo 64 during a speed run. That kind of shit is like next fucking level, right? And even a lot of that, I believe, a lot of the old AOLers, as we call ourselves, right, can relate to a lot of those things. And it's just the communities I find myself in, whether it's retro gaming or whether it's in the Infosec security, cybersecurity. There's so many people who are like, oh yeah, I started on AOL, or for that matter, like in the AOL scene, like, oh yeah, I was on AOL. I had this tool and this prog, and I was sending mail bombs. I was being a dick. I was sending in mail bombs and this and that. I never mail bombed anyone. I was such a good boy, and I'm like, fucking, I was treated like I was the one who. I guess technically I did write a mail bomber. Wait a minute. See? Look at that. I'm a hypocritical piece of shit because I did write a mail bomber. I mean, it never actually got released because it had a virus. But I just realized that's kind of silly. Yeah, I definitely had I had a slick ass mail bomber that I was providing. Ain't that some shit? Now I have to dwell on that.
Yeah, but that was totally normal back then. I mean, that's what everybody did. So,
oh man.
You remember that movie from the 80s? It's called Daryl, Darryl. Anyway, he was a kid who was like really like a robot, and he ends up playing like F1 pole position and playing it at speeds that were like humanly impossible. So when you mentioned the speedrun stuff, reminded me of that.
Oh, I gotta check that out.
It's super good. I watched it again recently, and it was just as good as I remember it.
Oh my goodness, I never heard this. I'm looking at it right now. I will be doing this after I call my mom when we're done recording and be like, hey, remember that counseling stuff? Oh gosh, I can't wait.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think a lot of people, it'll really resonate with them. So I'm glad I didn't have to live it. No offense, because it sounded pretty awful. But at least that you got something out of it, right? You came out the other side and you learned a valuable lesson, but now you get to help people and defend America, which is something that's really amazing. A lot of people probably wish they could be doing too. So I'll definitely put the link in the show notes to some of your courses and stuff. And I think that also a lot of people in cybersecurity will listen to this podcast too. So hopefully it'll help get more people in InfoSec connected to this podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm also in InfoSec, so
that'd be awesome. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention this, but that I wrote the ransomware course for a group called SANS. For 2 years previously, before starting the course development, I taught Forensics 610 for SANS, which is called reverse engineering malware. I also made it my life mission to know fucking everything about malware. I forgot to mention that. It's kind of a big deal. I never got over the viruses and the malware thing. And so again, part of that, the positivity is I learned that, well, I pushed myself to learn more and more and more about it. I will never, ever, ever, ever be the guy, well, I've got a virus and I got the malware, I don't know what's going on. Or whether it's my organization or my clients' organizations, right? So, just another example of, I taught a class, and this is outside of work hours, right? In addition to my general work hours, and just wanting to be the person who's not ever dumbfounded by a virus or malware ever again. So yeah, I definitely love that relation between, InfoSec, as we call it, cybersecurity, whatever you want to call it, and the AOL scene. I would love to hear other stories at some point on your cast, or just for folks who hear this and are like, dude, check it out. Here's my origin story, whether you're even in IT or not. I'd be like, in the scene, this happened and that happened, and now I do this. Like, I'd love to hear all that kind of crap. It'd be really cool.
What do you think of the Strengthening America Cybersecurity Act of 2022 that was passed in March that requires reporting of ransomware incidents within 24 hours for critical infrastructure? Is that far enough?
Honestly, I don't believe that it's far enough, but I don't know how much government oversight I'm really, really in love with in terms of forcing someone's hand and divulging what may or may not have happened. However, when it comes down to ransomware, let alone general threats throughout the world that we deal with, right? Whether it's an incident response or just at your company, right? Whoever you are listening, company X, Y, or Z, many of them go unreported. And the fewer that are reported, right? The less we report, the royal we, the more that these things are going to continue to be successful. We have to keep our eyes on the prize. We have to understand techniques, tactics, and procedures, what we call TTPs. In other words, how a threat actor or a group of threat actors does what they are going to do, right? What do they implement? What tools do they use? What methods do they do X, Y, or Z with? If we don't know about those things, we can run into the problem where we're blind to them. So the more that we learn about them, the better. Critical infrastructure is, it's just that, right? It's critical infrastructure. In that regard, I do stand by it. I do believe that any critical infrastructure really needs to report when they've suffered a ransomware attack. For that matter, really, an incident. Then again, there comes a delineation of what is an incident, right? My answer versus someone else's answer versus the answer you'd put on a Security Plus certification exam. They may differ wildly. But I think that any type of critical infrastructure that we all depend on, we have to have a modicum of oversight and overview. And if we don't, and we allow these things to fall victim to attacks, one of the big things that we always worry about, especially with ransomware attacks, are some people call them upstream and some people call them downstream attacks. So in other words, if I break into an organization, right, I do my little fiddling and diddling, which is, I'm going to start using that term now, fiddling and diddling through their data. I exfiltrate a bunch of fun stuff. I learn some things. I take some screenshots, whatever. I eventually deploy my payload encryptor, right, the ransomware malware itself. Well, what did I just learn about that organization's partners and vendors, suppliers, and their competitors for that matter? They may have competitive intelligence, which most organizations do. If I utilize that in a negative or in a bad way, then it can cause many, many problems down the line. For critical infrastructure folks, especially if they're not reporting, hey, we dealt with this. When they were here, they did the following, and did the following, the details on that doesn't necessarily need to be public. There has to be a line in the sand. You don't want to say this host, exact name, these user accounts, their exact name, they're used for these purposes, right? They had these passwords, for example, to the public. But the more that you can redact the information while still explaining it, awesome. When it comes to other critical infrastructure in that realm, whatever that be, sharing with them as much as you possibly can is very, very important. Unfortunately, we run into the situation where much of our critical infrastructure is in competition with itself, essentially. And so you run into the situation where they don't necessarily want to tell one another, oh, well, we do things this way and that caused a problem, because simply saying we do things this way, however detailed that might be, could lead to additional competition, which is really not our concern from the InfoSec community, but I can totally see how that could be an issue. So overall, critical infrastructure also needs to be defined, and it is in that law, by the way, but neatly defined so that you don't have maybe a provider who's a really small mom and pop type of shop who maybe backfeeds some data into the electricity grid or something, or even just like a large solar farm or something like that, and all of a sudden they're being considered a critical infrastructure provider or something like that. You're like, well, wait a minute, where is that line in the sand? And I think there's going to need to be some additional review and oversight and precedents set, sadly, in the court systems to flesh that all out. But overall, for face value of how the law is written and its overall intent, I support it.
Yeah, me too. Have you heard of any weird ransomware incidents, like people being locked in hotel rooms or cars?
As far trying to be serious, I couldn't do it. First off, not yet is the proper answer. I was going to say no, and I'm like, let's go with not yet. Not for ransomware specifically. I have heard some just zany, off the wall, silly things. Taking control of automation and control systems within hotels and locking people's doors, turning their lights on, putting the shades up in their room when they're trying to sleep. Things like I have heard of those things. I have not heard of something as silly as that type of situation related to ransomware, but I know it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. I also worry that as we get more into the Internet of Things, the IoT based ransomware attacks, like in that realm, it really worries me. There was an article a while ago, and I don't even remember what it was. Ransomware coffee maker. Let's see if I can randomly find it while we're talking here. It was a proof of concept, really, on YouTube. It's called What a Hacked Coffee Machine Looks Like. And it's a kind of an overview of, hey, this internet connected box, like we can actually get our code to run on it. And for that matter, we could lock it down. Imagine an organization not being able to use their coffee maker, one of those like nice Keurigs or even more expensive ones that's plumbed right into the water line that everyone relies on, throughout the day, every day, 5 days a week or whatever. Having that held ransom, I mean, that's going to be hilarious the first time that becomes a real big thing. But you start to lose the humor of it when that becomes something like, someone locked in a car for a period of time, ha, ha, ha. But those connected cars, especially when they're connected via LTE and some of them being exposed to the internet with services they should not be, what's going to happen when people start poking at those? You're going to start to hold people for ransom in their vehicles. It's going to get ugly at some point. I'm not trying to be the looking at the negative, but I mean, it's going to happen. If we don't acknowledge it and try to lock down those things sooner than later, then we're all doomed. So I'm sure you're going to hear some hilarious stories involving ransomware and what it's done, but not yet, not on my side at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Would you be able to tell us about maybe one or two really interesting cases that you investigated?
Yes, I can't speak to a lot of a number of the cases I've worked, especially directly, given of course the fun things with non-disclosure agreements and things of that nature, which again goes back to the whole many orgs don't want to report things. Overall, incident wise, outside of just ransomware, but just going into like threats that we deal with in digital forensics and incident response and DFIR land. I think one of the things that was more interesting to me, it was back in 2016 through 2017. There were a couple groups that were based in Iran, and they were categorized then and now as advanced persistent threats. One of them is now known as APT-33, and another one is known as APT-34. These particular groups during that time frame were engaged in operations that many of them were highly targeted, by the way, and they were hitting aviation, energy, and the other petrochemical type of things. You can even just Google APT-33 chemical or something like that, and you'll find a number of hits on this type of activity. They were targeting for a while. They were targeting this known exchange vulnerability where many organizations out there, they may have had multi-factor authentication enabled within their exchange, especially their Outlook Online Office 365, for example, tenants, right? But what they didn't have is they did not have legacy protocols disabled. and also just Outlook Web Access, OWA. Misconfigurations in those were allowing for a tenant that otherwise was expected to be multi-factored to not be multi-factored. And then in those cases, if you have credential exposure, especially due to something as simple as phishing, you would have a big problem. Well, what these groups were doing wasn't just phishing for credentials, but rather they started, this is the first time I saw this mechanism or method being used. I was probably late to the party. Everyone I've asked about this in my realm has said, like, no, that's when I noticed it was a really big thing. You know, we didn't see it a lot before that. I'm sure there's some threat researchers out there who are like, no, like we saw it before that. I didn't. In 2016, these Iranian groups were leveraging the fact that you would have these exposed OA services that were only single factor at the time, right? When the organizations thought that was not a thing. And they started using a methodology known as password spraying. So password spraying is kind of a subset of brute forcing, if you will. A brute force attack is when you typically think of a brute force attack, you think that you're trying to attack using brute strength. And when that comes to password-based attacks, trying to authenticate to an account, for example, usually you think of an account against which you throw tens, hundreds, thousands, millions, whatever, of passwords until one works, right? And then you've brute forced that password. Like, oh, look, I went through 70,000 passwords from this password file that I have. Shout out to rocku.txt, which many pen testers and red teamers are familiar with and always will be going forward. But an alternative to that is, as opposed to taking one account and shoving a bunch of credentials against it, password spraying is when I take one password and I spray it, hence the term, it's cute and also a little weird, against an organization's user base. So there was a tool that was known as SensePost Ruler. And you can just look up Exchange Ruler Abuse Tool or something like that. But it was made by SensePost, like the word sense, SensePost, one word. And what Ruler would allow you to do is, if you had Exchange with auto discover enabled where it should not have been enabled, it allowed the ability to, and technically still does for some really poorly configured older, environments, to get a dump of the global address list, what we call the gallery sometimes, or just the gal. The global address list means I could go into an organization. Well, not go in, I'm not going anywhere, but the tool can run against an organization's tenant and pull down a list of all the mailboxes. Once you have a list of all the mailboxes, you then take a certain password or a small subset of passwords and you attempt it against every one of those usernames. So specifically, what these Iranian groups were doing, they were using passwords that were a combination of the month and or the season, like summer, winter, whatever, and the year. So they would, for example, try January 2016, or they would try winter 2016. And they would also do slight deviations like an exclamation point at the end or something like that. They then started using the same concept by putting the year first, 2016, January, and then exclamation point or maybe the number 1. But that January through December with a year with or without the exclamation point, it turns out that was a password being used by a gratuitous number of accounts, user accounts around the world. I had no idea until 2016. And the reason I knew is because all of a sudden I was working cases, helping out here and there, where we had organizations where this tool, SensePost Ruler, and there are other tools, by the way, it's just the one I remember the most, was being used to quote unquote defeat their MFA system and to eventually succeed in breaking into accounts. Now, in reality, they weren't really bypassing MFA. What they were doing was using a service that was being exposed that didn't have MFA enabled, right? That's really what they were doing. Like the system shouldn't have had MAPI, enabled. Like why was MAPI enabled? Why was RPC enabled? What's going on with that? But furthermore, they were then able to leverage a feature, 2 of them specifically, but a feature in Exchange, more specifically Outlook, I should say, that allows you to have a rule. There's 2 different types of rules. One of them would execute a program. So you could have a process, technically. You could have back then, not anymore. You could go into Outlook, for example, and say, I want to make a new rule. When an email comes in and it has this subject or it has this, whatever, I want to run a program. And they found a way to make that run a program be set to a remote program. And that remote program would then be downloaded via WebDAV. It's an extension to HTTP, and it's kind of like SMB, server message blocking, or what Windows in general uses for file sharing and things of that nature. PS exec and tools that move laterally around the environment, they use SMB. File sharers use SMB or CIFS in a Windows environment. It's kind of like that, but over HTTP. So in other words, these threat actors, right, were going to organizations where they couldn't log into accounts normally because they had MFA enabled. They couldn't just go to their O365, which now is officially called Microsoft 365, and they couldn't just say, hey, check it out. Here's a username, here's a password, go, right? That would fail. But they use these tools and mechanisms to identify, was MAPI enabled, was RPC enabled? And if it was, can we get a list of all the accounts? And if we can get a list of all those accounts, okay, great. Let's go ahead and spray passwords against them. And let's just use this single factor feature service that's exposed that they probably don't even know about. If that was successful, they would then say, okay, well, I'm going to use this tool like Ruler or one of the others, and I'm going to add a rule to the account that whenever an email comes in with, whatever they would configure, sometimes it would be like any email, right? Or it would be an email with a specific subject, and then they would send that email inbound to that user. It would trigger the malware download, and then their Outlook client would run the damn malware. It was like, that's not good. So there are a bunch of vulnerabilities, if you will, that were all chained together. And by utilizing this methodology, the Iranian APT 33 and 34 threat actors were able to gain access to a number of environments. And working those cases, it was very interesting because it's like that small thing that we realized in the InfoSec community at one point in 1 year, where all of a sudden you realize, what in the heck? This is a huge problem. This is a big damn problem. Looking at those passwords, the passwords where I'm talking about, by the way, forget Ruler, forget exposed, single. Actually, don't forget those. If you're in charge of your Exchange environment, on premises or not, make damn sure you have legacy protocols disabled. If you need them, why do you need them? I don't think you do need them. And if you feel you need them, it's for some old third-party software or it's something that you create in-house. Fix that problem, or use a conditional access policy to only allow specific accounts and enterprise applications to use legacy authentication. Otherwise, disable the damn thing. It's still a huge problem. But that's not even what I was talking about. What I'm really talking about are those damn passwords. March 2017 exclamation point. What year is this right now? It's 2022. It's July as we're recording this. July 2022 exclamation point. Think about what we've trained the IT industry for years. For years. Your password has to be at least how long? It was forever. It was at least 8 characters, which, by the way, sucks. Okay. But July 2022. Yeah, that's more than 8 characters. All right. So it's 9, actually. You have to have at least one capital letter. July is capital. You have to have at least one number. There's 4 digits with 2 unique numbers. You have to have a special character. Well, that's where the exclamation point comes into play. These passwords were used heavily for obvious reasons. People don't like to rotate their passwords, right? So they try to choose something that's easy to remember. Oh, the month and the year, exclamation point. Yay me, right? Or it became a situation on the other side, I should say. It became a situation because you can have a password policy within your organization, but it may be very difficult, including in your typical Active Directory-based network environment, to restrict passwords from having certain key phrases or strings within them. So there's a filter, passfilt, PASSFILT.DLL. It's a DLL that's part of Active Directory, right, provided by Microsoft. And it is a dynamic link library that provides the ability to filter out what passwords can or cannot be used within your organization. Okay. It is extremely freaking limited. You're able to say, you can't use this, you can't use that. You are not able to say things without extensive configuration or third-party mechanisms that say you cannot have a month as part of your password. You cannot have this particular name as part of your password. You cannot have this as part of your password. So you have to go to these third-party methods and tools, and Microsoft has addressed that over the years. But at the time, there was no way to stop your users from doing it. So then we had to come up with really creative things to remediate potential problems, right, for prevention. And that would be stuff like you go into Active Directory, you take all your user password hashes. You don't have to look at them in plain text, but you hash January through December with the current year and the next year, exclamation point, or previous year or two. You check those hashes against what you have in Active Directory. If anything matches, damn it, that user is using one of those don't use me passwords. So now you have to deal with that. So I'll digress there, but that case was those cases that I worked at. There's one big one for like 5 weeks. It sucked. During that time frame was big for me because it was such a simple thing. A password, a type of password, a format, a schema that many people around the world were using, and we really weren't cognizant of that until when? Until a bunch of Iranian threat actors showed us, hey, stupid, sucks for you. And from there, we then had to learn our lesson.
That's super interesting. What has helped you be successful in information security?
I think the biggest thing that has really helped out started back in the AOL scene, and it was being open to learning from others and learning to seek others to learn from them. You know, we didn't start our AOL scene days, jump into a room all of a sudden and know exactly what we're doing, right? We watched what others did. We watched their scrollers go by. We watched them talk about different progs. We watched them talk about, fake account generators. And then we started, hey, can I get one of those little guys and, take a look at it? And then we ask questions about it. Like, well, how's this work? And that type of thing. I've maintained that throughout my entire career. My big thing is networking, doing exactly what we're doing right now, Steve. Like me and you right now, we're communicating, we're networking, we're putting out this podcast. Again, very happy to be here. Love running my mouth about, cybersecurity, and that's what you're letting me do right now. So freaking awesome. And finding people of a similar interest. This is a passion for me, and it's a passion for many of the folks in the industry. And so finding those people and learning from them and also teaching them is awesome. I just love it. So going out of your way to do things like do presentations at conferences, or to, I help run a conference now. Why do I do that? I have enough jobs already, man. Well, because I know what it did for me, and I know what it did for my career, but also just for me growing as a person, let alone, in my specific field. I love learning from others. I love to see what other people are capable of doing. And you have to have humility, and you have to be able to say, holy crap, that person, the way they do this, freaking phenomenal. Way better than what I would do. Or for that matter, you have to be able to say, I have no idea what the hell that person's talking about, but I'm going to learn it. And a lot of people are just kind of scared to do that, and my first ransomware case that I had ever worked, I talk about ransomware a lot, obviously. I didn't know what the heck I was going to find. I had ideas, but I really didn't know exactly what I was going to find. So going into that case and having the principal analyst alongside me who had already been working ransomware cases, for these third parties, me moving into consulting was a new arena, if you will. He was like, check it out. Here's how we parse their data. Here's an example of what you see in a lot of these ransomware attacks. And it was like, all right, feed it. I'm the baby bird. Go. Like, give it to me. And the more that you're open to doing that, the better. I actually got a call. What am I talking about? I got hit up today on LinkedIn by a young man basically saying, hey, I put in for some internships with your company, and I'm wondering if you could put in a good word for me. And I'm like, first off, who the hell are you? Right? Like, wait, what? But after communicating with him for a little bit, it didn't take long for me to realize this person is a freaking go-getter. He does exactly what I tell people to always do. Reach out, make the effort, connect with people, and let them know I'm interested and I want to learn. And that is what's helped me be so successful. A big part of that networking was doing presentations. Even when I was newer to the digital forensics field, within a year, I was putting in a call for paper submission, which we call it a CFP. If you want to present at a conference, for example, I want to run my mouth on stage, right? You put in an entry as you submit a call for papers entry, and you say, hey, you have an open call for papers. I'd like to talk about the following, right? Here's my topic. Here's my abstract. If you're really good at doing them and you want to be accepted, here's my partial or even complete outline, by the way. And when I did my first submission, I got accepted. And I kind of shit myself because I didn't know what I was talking about. Like, I basically said, hey, I want to talk about these things. And then it occurred to me, shit, I know like 60% of what I just offered to do, and it got accepted. And from that point, the crunch and learning and putting together that presentation and then being able to present it as a source of authority on it, you don't say shit like, hey, 2 weeks ago I learned. You just skip that part. Rather, it's more like, hey, check it out. This is how this works. And when you go to other talks by other people, or when you read their research, their papers, hell, their tweets, these days everything's on Twitter. You read their tweets about, hey, I pulled this apart and here's what I found, right? It's all about the human element, and that recognizing that and striving to be a part of that. It goes back to community, right? Accepting and being part of the community, which full circle goes right back to the whole, we're talking together right now because of the AOL scene, right? And that's where it really kind of continues. As you foster a community, you become part of it, and you continue forward.
Got it. Is there anything else you want to share with the listeners?
I'd love to share everything with the listeners and just keep talking and running my mouth and talk more about ResEdit and the fun we used to have back in the Mac scene and whatever. Talk about different cases I've worked just in general. May not be large, tantalizing cases you've heard of in the news, but many of those very similar types of cases I've got to work. Various ransomware crews have been dealing with them a lot recently. The way they do their thing, it's phenomenal. But I'm going to digress because we've been going a while here. So I would like to share that, speaking of community, we have a community that is part of the conference that I help put together. The conference is called Cactus Con. So like cactus, like, you're in the desert and he's a big old cactus and you go, damn, that's a cactus. Cactus Con, I guess. CactusCon.com, or just, youtube.com/CactusCon, or twitter.com/CactusCon, or just look up the damn word CactusCon. We, however, have a Discord server, and it's actually called the Cactus Con Community. And its design and intent was just that, to foster a year-round community where folks can go and learn more about information security. I'm going to click on it right now while I'm talking to you. We have a number of channels in here. One of them, for example, being free training resources. So we have a number of, it's just called free-training, technically is the channel name. And even myself, I've dumped, I don't know how many damn links in here to free training resources for all different types of cybersecurity fun things, right? I'm big on the blue team cyber defense, but folks have been sharing, all kinds of things about red teaming, meaning like actively attacking, resources on just learning about like what's a vulnerability and how are they exploited, all these various things. If any of you from back in the old scene are like, I kind of want to get into to cybersecurity, right? Or InfoSec, whatever we want to call it. And I want to do defense, or I want to do attacker simulation, whatever the hell, like pop over to our Discord and check us out. We've got a bunch of fun stuff in there, and I'd just love to hear from you there. For that matter, hell, ping me in the AOL Discord. I'm in there, right? RJ_chap is my Discord name that I use, so you'll see me in there. Come say hi. Come check us out at CactusCon. If you'd like to come physically in person, even better, right? But our 11th event, CactusCon 11, is going to be in January, on January 27th and 28th. That's Friday and Saturday. It's going to be held at the Mesa Convention Center in Mesa, Arizona, in the United States. But it's also going to be virtual. So we're doing another hybrid event. We had to adapt to a virtual event obviously for COVID reasons. After which this year we stuck with we adapted to yet again a hybrid approach where we did a virtual conference alongside a physical conference. And we're going to continue with that going forward. So if you want to check out our talks, check us out at cactuscon.com/YouTube, or just go to YouTube and look up CactusCon. In previous years, prior to when I jumped into the mix as the lead, we didn't record our videos, or at the very least, we didn't put them online. And that was a decision that was made, by design. That changed for CactusCon 9 and 10. So we now have a number of videos for 2 different years of CactusCon. So check those out. It's all free training, free resources. Let me know what you think about it. If anyone listening is interested in possibly sponsoring the conference, then I'd be the person to talk to. So I have transitioned away from the lead project manager, if you will, right, of the whole shebang, because gosh, I have too much work. And I've moved to the liaison in general, or / the sponsor liaison. So if you want to talk to me about the conference at all, hit me up. If you'd like to talk about sponsoring, volunteering, whatever, you were like, hey, what do I have to do to get a talk accepted? Or, I like these things. How could that apply to a talk? Hit me up. Just ping me. I'm very busy. I work way too much. I may not be able to reply right away, but I will. So check us out at CactusCon. Come see us do our thing and be part of our thing. Oh, isn't that cute? Come see us do our thing and be part of our thing. And also, if you're interested in learning more about ransomware, I have a SANS course out now. It's not cheap, quote unquote. You would most likely have to have your employer flip the bill for the course, but it is SANS Forensics 528. And you can read more about it by just going to for528.com/course. And that will redirect you to an hour-long video of me talking about how great the course is. And yes, you can listen to me run my mouth even more because I love to do it. So those are the things I wanted to share. A big thing that's a part of me and my life outside of just my day job are CactusCon and my SANS training and content. So definitely check that out. And then finally, if you're interested at all in seeing any of the other stuff that I've put out there, all the free stuff I put out there, right? It's incidentresponse.training is the website. So there's I got a bunch of presentations and podcasts and workshop materials and all that kind of crap on there. So check that out. If you have any questions on any of the material, you're having any issues getting through it, want to find more stuff like it, whatever, just hit me up. The Discord for CactusCon or AOL is the easiest way to do it, but however you can, go for it.
Do you have any parting words of wisdom?
Yes, I do. Parting words of wisdom. The number one thing that I try to tell people that has made me successful, quote unquote, whether some people see me or people like me as a success or not, right? I like to think of it is do what you love. Find a way to do what you love for a living. And I've heard many, many people say that, but I don't see as many people doing it as I wish that I did. And for me, digital forensics and incident response, it just fits. It's just phenomenal. It's perfect. I fucking love it. Every day I go to work, I may have that tinge of, crap, I have this client call and their report's not done yet. I may have these little whiny episodes with my wife, like there's too much damn work and whatever. But when it really comes down to it, I love this shit. And when you love what you do, it makes everything else in your life just click into place that much more. For any of you out there who are like, you know what, I'm working at so-and-so and I hate this shit, right? If that's your take on what you do, change it. Do whatever you can to change it, even if it's something as small as finally realizing a dream, right? Of learning something new, a new technology, a new instrument. I don't care what the hell it is, right? We all in the AOL scene, we had a passion. We weren't there by force. We were there because we wanted to be. And that is what drove us. And that is what fueled our passion. And you should be able to have that enthusiasm in your everyday life. And if you don't have it now, if you find it, you'll be like, holy shit, this is awesome. And it's one of the things that I'm just always very, very proud of. I have a loving, awesome family. I may work too damn much, but even they know that I love my job. And it makes it, I was going to say acceptable. It makes it acceptable that I have to work. Working sucks. It makes it just that much easier. I can kind of float through some of the things. 'Cause I'm like, man, I'm having fun. If I have a threat actor who's in an environment, they're causing some fraud issues, or it's like a mage cart style of carting. Remember the old carting stuff that some people used to do in the scene? I used to be amazed at how people had the balls to just send packages to empty houses and go pick it up with stolen credit cards. Like, that's so stupid. Those people have evolved into some of the cases I work, some of the fraud cases that I work on a much grander scale, stealing products from, companies like an Amazon, if you will, but in a much smaller organization than Amazon. Those types of things, just it's really, really fun to look through and parse all that data. If you can't say the same thing about your job, then can you fix it? And if you can, then by all means, freaking do it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much.
Steve, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I know that we went well beyond what we originally thought we were going to do. And hopefully I've maybe gotten some folks a little passionate about learning some digital forensic stuff. Maybe pop over to our CactusCon Discord, or even just check out the Re-AOL project. If you're like, wait, you can log into an AOL 3 client in 2022? Yeah, that's how I met the podcast host, Steve, right here, who I'm talking to. Go check that out. So very, very happy to have been here. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to listen to future episodes to see what other stories the fellow post-scene adults, we're all adults now, and that ridiculous, have to share. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Hack the planet! Hack the planet!
Welcome to cyberspace.